from ABB, when we think about energy transition, we talk about maximising additions and minimising emissions. So what we mean by that is how we bring new technologies, sustainable and green energy sources into the mix. For the UK in particular, that means really focused around offshore wind, solar, nuclear. While at the same time, hydrocarbons are going to be with us for a long time. I'm sure that's something we'll touch on through this session. So how do we minimise the emissions both in use and in generation of hydrocarbons? And there, CCS, carbon capture and storage technologies, and electrification, particularly of offshore assets, are crucial and vital to that. So I think so far I've probably said nothing surprising or new on the topic for people here. And that's a good thing in the sense that I think that imperative is well known and understood in business and more generally across society. But coming to the other part, how do we maximise then the value or maximise the opportunities of the value chain? And three things that we're focused on, and that the many things we're focused on, three things that resonate for me on that topic. First of all is around, so what do we have already? Well, a lot of the skills and technologies we already have to address energy transition. There's some adaptability needed and some development, certainly agility within the skill set, but they're already in place. But there are gaps. So we're focused on particularly digital and digitalization, so how we use data, how we use digital twins to make some of those leaps from pilot projects or where we don't have scaled up use cases yet, particularly around things like carbon capture. Then lastly, and probably I would imagine most sessions talking about collaboration as well. What that means for me when I talk about collaboration, and particularly with energy transition, first of all, collaboration has to be a win-win. So it's moving away from thinking about a transactional type approach when working with partners. So something that's win-win, something that's a good fit between partners, something that we can look at the skill set and the skills that we have. So why do we want to do that? Well, because we want the best skills available to approach energy transition in particular projects. Lastly on collaboration is really around government and regulation, both between industry and government, but also across various forms of government and regulation as well. And again, I'm sure we'll come more to those topics.
Thank you, Simon. Andy, from your perspective, how do you see maximising the value across the energy transition?
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. From an engineering construction industry training board, of course, I'm going to come at this from a training and competence perspective. We're facing a significant skill shortage across the world, but obviously we're focused on the UK, and it isn't just around skills and competence at the craft and technician, construction and maintainers areas. It's also, leadership skills, project management skills, and leadership competencies. And I think for me, in maximising the opportunity, it's those leadership competencies that we should be focusing on. We're moving into, I think, uncharted waters. We're already in uncharted waters where we are bringing existing, stable cultures with new environments, new players. We've got quite fragmented and complex investor chains, asset owners working in cluster groups, and I think that there is a risk. The three key risks with that sort of environment is we've got a limited supply chain in this country. We've got an ever decreasing workforce availability as projects come online, and we've got a massive competition for programs, not just in the energy sector, but the wider process sectors, and of course civil infrastructure as well. So those key elements for me are almost like the perfect storm. It's not it's not anything that one organisation can tackle. Simon's already said collaboration, and you will be sick of that word by the time we finish here today, but that is an absolute key success factor in my view in maximising the success. But it's about how will we mitigate those key risks of limited supply chain, limited workforce and competing programs.
Thanks, Andy. And Jonathan, from Aker Solutions' point of view, how do you guys frame all this?
Thanks for the intro, Kevin. There are a couple of things that are worth just pointing out. You know, if we look at the energy transition and energy system as a whole, it is not something that's well established globally. You know, if you look at the oil and gas industry, that's well established. If you look at adding the marginal barrel, there is access to that. There are points where that oil can physically go, and there are markets and systems to support it in terms of sale. That's not the same for the emerging integrated energy system. So there's a complexity that we're not yet ready to deal with. The building blocks are there, but it's not quite ready, and that needs innovation. There are many different parties that need to collaborate to bring those solutions to the market. So I think back on the theme of collaboration is certainly there. Now, that's collaboration on project execution, on commercials, but also on technology. And I think technology is something that we're going to have a little bit more of a dialogue about, so I'll leave it there for now on the technology front. But the other comment is that this is a global industry. We're not stuck in isolation in one part of the world. The supply chain is global. The demands on that are global. And you look at, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act and how Europe has subsequently reacted to that. There is definitely a time critical nature here. And in order for us, in the UK certainly, for Northern Europe, to act quickly and make sure that we are part of the solution early. Because if we're not, the world moves on. And we want to be on that train. Exactly.
Alrighty. So collaboration. A lot of things we know well, a lot of new things that we may not know so well. But let me. The big elephant in the room, and certainly walking around here, a big theme was that, look, the oil and gas industry is evolving, but it's not going away. It is not the turn off the taps tomorrow morning. So Simon, how do you see that in terms of, well, oil and gas is here, but it's evolving?
It is, and I think we saw from OE UK's latest economic briefing yesterday that oil and gas will be part of the energy mix in the UK right through to 2050 and beyond.
25%, I think they said.
Exactly, an important, quite a substantial part. So diminishing, yes, but it's got a long future. So with that, we can ignore that, and that's one option. We could wish it was differently. That would be another option. I think facing that reality is super important. And how do we minimise, coming back to that point about minimising emissions then, how do we minimise the impact of those hydrocarbons? So I'm going to focus maybe a bit more on the production side. If we come to the UK and we talk about the energy mix, so power mix in the UK, then you'd say maybe currently around half is from truly renewable and green sources in terms of power generation currently in the UK. When you move to Scotland, that's over 80%, predominantly wind, onshore and offshore, but it's well over 80%. So that case for electrification, power from shore, for oil and gas, super strong. It's not something that we need to wait a long time into 2030 or some of those targets to see a real true benefit now from. Add to that the development in Scotland and offshore wind will be fast. Seagreen will be on stream imminently as well to add to that mix of renewable sources. Add INTOG projects as well, which specifically then address directly some of those challenges. So the case is clear, in my mind. The more subtle discussion, and it's one that I've had a few times this week, is around also though the source of gas. So gas will be important both in terms of domestic, industrial and power generation mix. For a lot of that time. Imported gas, we're currently a heavy net importer. Switched over a few short years ago, a heavy net importer of gas. That import of gas has 4 times the emissions impact of gas generation from the North Sea. So again, looking at that seriously and having an adult conversation around, okay, it's part of that mix, that is part of the reduction and minimisation of emissions as well.
It's got to be part of the overall equation, right? It's about looking
Absolutely.
at this holistically. Now, if I may, on the skills, Andy, you said that there's an unprecedented skills shortage, let's say, and it's not just here in Aberdeen, it's globally. In the world I live in, a lot of it would be, well, maybe that opens up other opportunities as well. I can do certain things remotely, so maybe I could live here and I could work on a digital twin somewhere else, or vice versa. But is the skills shortage just in the new energy, or is the skills shortage also in the traditional oil and gas, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's across the board, and of course, in any kind of seller's market, if you look at skills, people selling skills, they'll choose where they want to work. So, the question around whether hydrocarbons are not going away, in a global economy, hydrocarbons are needed for a controlled transition. So we've got to make sure that we get the messaging right to those people that are potentially going to come and work in this industry, that how important hydrocarbons are and what a contribution decarbonising oil and gas is to net zero. Because what we're seeing is, the industry is recruiting graduates, recruiting apprentices, and they're deployed on projects. It's a decommissioning project. It's not what they want. It's a seller's market. They'll go elsewhere. So it's very lumpy, and we've got to, as an industry, get this message right that decarbonising oil and gas assets, and let's not forget how important decommissioning assets are to get the liability off the balance sheet to enable us to pay for the future. It's all part of this global program. So let's not be siloed in our messaging. Let's get the messaging right.
And if I may come to you, Jonathan, you mentioned technology has a huge role to play in all this, positive and negative. And in the world I live in, there's more technology coming online every day, and we've got generative AI and digital twins and you name it, right? And look at the chemical industry and the material science and. But I know we were chatting beforehand, and you said, look, we can't wait for the perfect technology either.
Yeah.
So, and we've got to do all this other stuff. How do we balance all that?
Yeah. I think what's great is the conversation around technology and collaboration is a really exciting one. So, with technology, you want to drive as much competition ultimately into the market, because that's where the good solutions float to the top. How do you balance that up with collaboration and finding momentum for those solutions? How do you make it work like a Swiss watch? And the question then is, which is the right technology? So how do you accelerate the right ones that are ready for the market at the right time? If I may use a slight analogy, looking at history in television. So historically, everybody here, I see grey hairs in the audience, so Betamax versus VHS, that's something we can relate to. Now if you ask the experts, Betamax was a better technology, okay, but VHS won out. Now, should we have focused on one earlier? Should we have polarized the market to one? And I think the answer is no. In fact, actually, the digital video disc was ready at the same time as Betamax and VHS. In fact, it was cheaper to buy a digital video disc, the old LP size ones, than it was to buy a VHS. But it wasn't successful at that time. Better technology, better quality, better viewer experience, but it wasn't successful because the market wasn't ready for it. The market wanted to watch recorded channels. They couldn't watch TV, wanted to record the TV and watch it later. And the digital video disc couldn't do that until much later. So which is the right technology? Now, we can stand here and say, is hydrogen right? There's a lot of people who would say hydrogen is very challenging. I'd say absolutely, hydrogen is very challenging. But does that mean we shouldn't do it because electrification works better in principle? Absolutely not. Because the time taken to get electrification, all of our systems electrified, hydrogen could have moved on and plugged gaps. So we see a parallel race here. Yes, there will be winners and losers, absolutely. But it drives competition and it drives collaboration to get those solutions implemented. I think we should support that. It is something that we need to push as an industry. So, how are we doing that? How am I connected to that? We work very closely with ABB and have done for a number of years on certain technologies. Now, a few years ago, I was asked, well, subsea compression was a pipe dream a few years ago. But subsea compression has been running since 2015 on the Åsgard field. Much more complex than transformers or connectors that we're talking about for electrification or wind. So there's only one or two in the world, the second one going in a very aggressive environment. Now, that's been up and running, 99% plus availability, and that's with a compression system. So we have the technology, we have the building blocks. Let's use those building blocks to accelerate.
So folks, I'll be coming, if anyone has any questions, get ready because we'll be coming to you in a second. Now, we started out as well, and collaboration was a huge talking point from all three of you. And Andy, if I may, you said, look, there's certain challenges around skills and whatever. How do you see collaboration? And I know when we were chatting last week about this, again, it's not thinking about it from Aberdeen or the UK or ABB or Acre. It really is you're competing with everybody. It's co-opetition on a grand scale. So how do we address some of those risks, or standardization part of this, or what?
Yeah, standardization is key to this, and the oil and gas industry since 2014 has been good at focusing on standardization, but it's generally around technologies and equipment. If you can standardize competence, if you can standardize your craft and technician requirements, particularly in the construction and maintenance phase of projects, which there will be a significant amount of as we move forward, then you're starting to reduce some of the cost associated with onboarding people to do phases of work, not really understanding how they're certified, therefore training them and testing them yourself, and that adds cost, which generally goes as a cost to the project. So it's about standardization, it's about recognizing at an industry level what the base technical standards are for the craft and technician skills that are going to be required for construction and maintenance. And once you've identified those standards, you can use shared competence models. And we've proved this in the North Sea through the tubing of 120 workers from contractor to contractor as a contract's ended and another contractor's picked it up. No requirement to retest, no issues around competence assurance, because everybody identified the shared competence that these workers have been certified against. So it does work, it takes cost out of the project. I think the other, flipping it to the leadership side, thinking about collaborative contracting, again, is just as important, because we've got a limited supply chain, we've got, again, opportunities, and we've proven opportunities. The project performance improves when you think about alliances, when you think about shared risk, shared rewards, and not traditional transactional contracting strategies. Yeah. So again, it's not just the competence at a craft level, it's that competence at a leadership level.
So if I may, it's rethinking a lot of this. It's not kind of same old, say, we've done this for years, we just use the same template. Now, if I may, I'll be putting the two of you guys on the spot for a second. So I was with Intel for 13 years, right? So we were all for standardization, as long as it was our standard. And if I may, I walk around here, I look at technologies, and now it's easier in technology. Now we all follow the standard, but mine's better than yours because, and it's competitive advantage, right? And that drives innovation. But I suppose, let me come to you, Simon. From an ABB perspective, standardization and contracts and competencies, how do you see that playing out?
So I think, let's talk about the commercial part then in terms of standardization. And particularly how early that engagement can work. So it comes with technological advances, standardization, competition. Getting the right balance between those. As Jonathan said before, this is a global competition. It's not something that's in one region or one country as well. So in that context, the earliest engagement you can have, getting the best people and the right people to work together, regardless of some of those borders, and that might be geographical, it might be company borders, is vital. Getting the right tools and mechanisms, so those management mechanisms then to do that, is really important. Trust goes without saying, is you've got to build that, and it's vital to then sustain it when you have it as well. And that leads to some of that innovation, and it leads to finding, one particular system or technology is not going to be the perfect system and technology for every part of the energy, value chain, energy chain, any part of any industry. So you'll have strengths and in some places and some gaps in others. Finding those and developing those as well, and learning fast on where those strengths are is important. You've got to connect all of those topics together. They're not separate from one another. Yeah.
One company, one technology can't do it all.
No.
One country can't do it all. So, Jonathan, from your perspective?
From my perspective, I think I agree with very, very much with what you're saying, Simon. I think when we come and talk about standardization, what we need to think about is how to standardize interfaces. If we can standardize interfaces, you still allow a very strong competitive advantage for people. And that allows that competition to continue, but it allows a plug and play. We see it in digital. So a few years ago, there were a lot of people developing platforms, databases, and saying, come and use ours, we'll integrate the whole lot. Now, if you've got that, it's a great gig, but if not, you're in trouble. You're out completely. But what we've seen is the APIs and the interfaces being standardized. That's really helpful. How long did it take for mobile phones to get on the same platform? Right? How many Apple Android chargers were around the house? And I still can't find any, but at least they're all on USB-C now, right? So my view on this is let's standardize the interfaces. That's going to enable a lot. And similar to sort of comment on the skills, actually. Let's break it down and go, what are the transferable bits? What are the bits that are really different? And what are the bits that are transferable? Yes, some of the standards might be different between nuclear, between oil and gas, between offshore wind, but there's a whole heap of stuff that is very, very similar. The skill set is there, foundational is there. And if I may as well, just to comment further on standardization that would really benefit the industry. So we see the wind industry and a focus on the turbines. Great that these are growing in scale, great that they're growing, but every time they scale up, how much effort and energy goes into the development of that new technology and interface.
The next one, yeah.
And it's sunk. You don't then get the benefit of the marginal turbine coming out because it's new R&D. Consolidate, step, and then develop further.
True. We have time probably for one or two questions. Any questions? Now, everyone told me coming to Aberdeen, they'll be all talking all the time. and people have been fairly quiet. All right. Right, look, the clock is against us anyway. Just to wrap up, we've got, if you can read that from the back of the room, you have excellent eyesight. But we have the contact details here for the three gentlemen. Before we wrap up, guys, I want to come back and, again, this is a huge topic and we've touched on something. We had a list of things here about, is green jobs the right word? And we had a lot of, we could be here for all day. What would be the one takeaway statement you'd say to people to say, well, walk away from this thinking about one thing? Jonathan?
You went reverse order, that put me on the spot. I think very clearly we've got a great opportunity at the moment. The wind is behind us, there's money on the market, the oil and gas industry, however you might look at it currently, it's still in business. Okay, and we've got revenues coming from that. Let's make the most of that now, while we have it. Because there may come a point in future where the wind changes and we are not able to leverage it. Let's do it now. Now's not the time, this is the final one, this is a bit edgy. Now's not the time for more studies. Now is the time for signing up and doing some of the projects. Because unless we do it now, we're kicking the can down the road.
Andy?
Yeah, so collaboration is used a lot. It's an easy word. It's very hard to do. And so every single person who's got a stall here today has paid for that bit of space. The reason they've done that is because they've got self-interest. You can't take self-interest out of any of the business. It's absolutely key. It's about managing, identifying, understanding that self-interest in a collaborative environment and making sure everybody's self-interest can be met. And my soundbite, if I'm allowed, would be, we talk about supply chain. The word chain indicates single point of contact in a link. Let's talk about supply partnerships or supply pools and not chains.
Last word, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I almost
You
wish
can have
that was the
that,
last word. But yeah, I mean, I'd maybe go one step further and talk about the value chain. So that starts with where we start with that supply chain, but it goes all the way through to the end use and end consumers as well. Vital part of the whole discussion and making sure that we get that discussion and that feedback and that engagement all the way through to end users, industry and just society more broadly. We have most of the technologies, most of the skills that we need. We need to invest heavily in those that are the gaps to develop. I think we understand and we need to embrace the responsibility. We have heavy responsibilities, again, everyone who's paid to be here, to deliver on energy transition. That's with us.
Yes.
So making sure we maximise that, maximise the opportunities for the economy. That's why we're here, for the environment, but also for our people and our families at the end of that chain.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Clock is against us. The next session is ready to go. Thank you very much. Thank you for turning up.
Thank you.